Welcome to The Curiosity Solution. I'm your host, Beverly Beal. Join us as we explore the science of curiosity, share stories of people who've used curiosity to improve their lives, and maybe inspire some aha moments along the way. Hello. Hi, Vidya. I'm so happy to have you on my show today. Vidya Moorthy is really quite a very brilliant woman that I met through some of my dealings here in the Austin, Texas area. Um, and it was really a chance encounter at a roundtable session at one of the uh, Vicki Goodwin. She's the representative of the Texas House, and we were talking about um, cultural needs, how women business owners and all this. And anyway, Vidya is um, someone who has such a wonderful, well-rounded global perspective that her richness of experience was something I just had to share with my audience. So, Vidya, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and why the curiosity solution is basically something that you use yourself on a daily basis?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Beth, and it's a pleasure, and I'm delighted to be on this podcast and talking with your listeners. Um, my story is really pretty simple, and the fact of the matter is, I came to the U.S. I was born and raised in a middle class family in South India, and I came to the U.S. more than 25 years ago. And education was everything to me and my family. So I did manage to get two master's degrees, including one at Michigan State. And my background is really in communication and public relations. I joined a firm in Detroit and was the head of their client services for North America. And I was moved back to Asia to manage their Asia Pacific division, and did that for many years while I became an entrepreneur. And life brought us back to Austin about 2.5 years ago, a little less than 2.5, but yeah, that's how long I've been here in Austin. And I have my own company here, Kluru. And I think what really drives, I think, my desire to be in conversation with you, Bev, is the fact that um, I was looking at the tagline, and I think we are all oranges looking for a rhyme. And that's what called out to me. And I think what appeals to me is the fact that somehow, perhaps along the way, that all of us have now come to a point where we are beginning to hesitate to be curious. And maybe it's because we're already flooded with information from so many sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is that information overload. So, because we already have access to so much uh, information, I just think that that leaves us less time and mental space for intentional curiosity.
That's a good point because um, the information that we're constantly receiving often has no wisdom associated with it. Uh, and Plural, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit more about where you came up with that name. How, this background behind that. But um, the wisdom part. Um, when you're talking about all these different experiences, getting the two masters, which woo, that's impressive. First of all, and having gone to all these different places, managing so many people and so many projects. How do you take all of that information and distill it down into this, essentially the wisdom piece? How, when you're going through it and you're talking about the curiosity and how you're almost afraid to even ask for the ask, well, how do I this and that? How does that show up in your physical body? What is your is that part of your process of figuring out, no, is this a route that I need to explore more? Is this, or is it more of an intellectual exercise? How does that show up for you?
Thank you for that question, Bev. But I think it would help to talk briefly about the nature of my work.
Okay.
I manage two companies. One is in India and one's here, and we serve global clients. I have clients in India, in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in Europe, Switzerland, Poland, certainly here in the U.S., California, Michigan, Texas, and we are in the business of professional development. We try to help people become better versions of themselves at their work, and we help people enhance their non-technical skills. So whether you are trying to become better at decision making or strategic thinking, or communicate better, or manage your emotions better in the workplace, or you're trying to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, or your team is trying to work with another team in another geographical region of the world, cross cultural communication. That's the kind of training that we do. And I work extensively in three segments. So I work with community colleges, I work with the corporate world, and I work with nonprofits. And those are the
Okay.
three broad segments. And I worked with community colleges for years. Um, in that backdrop, when you are trying to help somebody take one step closer towards feeling more gratified as a human being, more satisfied as a professional, more joyful on the planet as they live, work, and play. And it is a tango of all of these holistic elements, I think.
Mm.
Um, the only thing that serves me well is good intention and curiosity, which is followed up with a tremendous amount of effort. And that curiosity needs to be based on respect, first of all, right? And second, it has to be followed up with action. And that's why I'm so passionate about education, because I'm a student every day. And in order for me to absorb all of this knowledge about companies, different domains, people, their roles, look at the global geopolitical landscape, which is, constantly and rapidly evolving. And you're trying to take all that information and then find an appropriate way to weave that in and deliver that in a context of receiver orientedness. So you take all that information and you deliver it in a way that makes sense to the people that you're talking to, and you understand the consequence, the human, the emotional, psychological consequence of what you're trying to teach them. And that's where I think the wisdom piece comes in. Because when you translate knowledge into information that's usable in life situations, for personal growth, for spiritual growth, for social growth, then I think you need to find that element of wisdom, so that you can connect to people in a way that it makes sense to them. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like I said, to me personally, intention is the dominating force that I think drives the nature of our impact that we have around the people that we all come in contact with. So I hope that kind of answers your question too.
Yeah, it does. I'm going to kind of circle back a little bit. You talk a lot about, business development, professional development, but a lot of the words that I'm hearing sound more almost as personal development. Now, I personally believe that personal development and professional development go hand in glove, because whatever you're dealing with, if you have like if, for example, you have a person has unresolved issues from their family of origin, and then suddenly they have a boss that reminds them of their mother or father, that dynamic can come in and cause issues within just that relationship, which does impact personal or professional development. Do you address anything like that, or is it more kind of outside of that realm?
Bev, a lot of my girlfriends, we are now having children. Our children have all grown up together, and they're at an age where they've all begun to date and date seriously because they're all in their early 20s.
Mhm.
And I heard my one of my friends tell her daughter that the man that you date is the same man that you're going to marry. And so she was trying to explain to her daughter that don't think that things are going to dramatically change the day that you get married, right? And I'm going to bring that example into our discussion here. Uh, the Vidya that's talking to you right now is the same Vidya who gets up and goes to work, is the same person who is a mom, who is a wife, who manages a home and a social life. I don't think that you can actually distinguish between the two. You cannot have one personality that's at home and another personality that you magically conjure up from thin air that you take into work. That's not
No,
going to happen. So,
I
all
will
kinds.
disagree with you a little bit. For the most part, you're right. Most people are, what you see is what you get. I know I certainly am. And we all have seen people who, for whatever reason, feel like they need to wear a mask, whether it is um, a personality that it feels as if they're having massive imposter syndrome, or if they are someone who uh, neurotypical individuals often have to find a way to wear their typical mask, um, when in fact they are neurodivergent. So that is an area where there is not the same person that you're dating as opposed to the person that you're marrying. But I kind of digress a little bit on that. Um, when you are, and like even when you're talking about helping people understand other cultures, do you find that some of your client base is having to kind of again mask up as a way to fit in or to be understood, rather than teaching people to be more respectful? Have you had to help people through that issue?
Sure. I will answer that question, but if it's okay, I'd like to address the
Sure.
point that you made before you asked me the question. Uh, I think communication psychology indicates that all our external, I think, impact comes from four different aspects. And the first one is values, the second one is attitudes, the third one is behaviors, and the fourth one is opinions. So it's values, attitudes, behaviors, and opinions. And going back to what you were talking about is wearing that mask to work, you know, the mask to work is only possible with behaviors and
Mm,
what you say and what you do. The other three, the values that you have, the attitude that you wear every single day inside you, and the opinions that you have, which you may or may not voice, those three don't change from the time that you're at home to the time you go to work. So
good
I
point.
think I think that was one of the distinctions that I'd like to make first. And
Mhm.
then talking about your second question, in terms of people interacting with people who are different from who they are. Um, I do see that, like with most other aspects, everybody seems to be different in this respect. They are people who unfortunately prefer to not step outside their comfort zone at all. And if I am, let's say, a person of Filipino descent, I just want to be with other Filipinos, and anything else makes me uncomfortable. And that's not necessarily based out of disrespect or dislike or anything. It's just a preference. And
Mhm.
then there are others, people like me, for example. The more different you are, the more I'm motivated to know you, and that I think enriches my point of view, and it enriches me as a person, as a professional, and which is why I think I'm able to connect with so many people across the planet. And I was talking to an educator in Finland, and she and I have come to become best friends. And one of my best friends here is a person who's almost 70 years old and ex-CIA and a Caucasian, and he and I have nothing in common. But I'm not kidding. We can talk, till the cows come home. And I think that if people were open to learning from people who've had life experiences different from theirs, um, the most sobering discovery is to eventually find out how similar we all are. Beverly as a mother is really not that different from Vidya as a mother,
Right.
right?
Right. I love that. See, and I was one of those people in college that if you were from, of course, again, my background was very, very limited in exposure to people. There were 15 people in my high school graduating class. So the opportunity I had when I got to college to meet people from other backgrounds, and other ethnicities, I was like a kid in a candy store and loved that's where that curiosity really drove me, because as a child my curiosity was fed through books because we didn't have the internet. I was that weirdo who loved to read the Encyclopedia Britannica, even though it was old and outdated. I was thrilled that I had that. How about you? I mean, you do have this insatiable drive to learn and expose yourself to new ideas. Was that something that was rewarded as a child, or was that something that you developed later on?
Well, I grew up in a society that was predominantly homogeneous, because we were all raised in this small city in South India where everybody, we all dressed the same, spoke the same language, ate the same kind of food, and celebrated the same festivals predominantly. But
Yep.
having said that, I think that when you are transplanted from one part of the globe to another, and over the course of maybe 2.5 decades, to have been fortunate enough to have been working with people from so many different nations, uh, I have come to believe that it is not only a prerequisite for me to be able to just be competent at what I do, but I think it is rewarding on a spiritual level, on a very deep level. And it allows you to connect with humans in a way that has unfortunately become so rare. Once you break the I think the mold of having to have these surface level conversations, and you are really talking to the core of a person and they're able to see your core as well. um, I think the power of that organic strength is so immense and so rewarding. And once I saw that happening, the more it happened, it kind of snowballed, and I think resulted in who I am today. But I so respect that about you as well, Beverly, because I have noticed you, and I've been seeing you at so many different events, organizations. We serve on the same board as well for Texas Women in Business. So I've seen you and the way that you move around the room, and how open you were to me first, when you saw me, and how warm and welcoming that you were.
Oh.
Um, and I think that those are the kinds of things that I think eventually people remember about us when we leave the planet. That should be our true legacy.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. The thing that you bring to the table, though, as well, is um, your 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 questions are they're in that wonderful middle zone of being soft and penetrating at the same time. And I think that was one of the things that that I appreciated the most about getting to know you some more is uh, because you don't push back, or you don't, excuse me, you don't hold back, but you're not. Um, you also hold people accountable. So, like, if they say something that you don't agree with, you're like, okay, well, I hear you, and then you share your side of things, which ends up being a far more educational experience, which I believe is also a big reason why some people shy away from asking the questions, from indulging their curiosity, because at least in my perspective, too many people have this preconceived notion about how things are supposed to be. And if they ask questions, they might learn that their reality has been built on shaky soil. And I don't feel as if you have any fear of that, that it's more of a, oh, I get to learn something new. Yes. What else? What else can I learn? Okay, was that information that I had before? Was that the right thing? Nope. Okay, great. Moving on. And you know, speaking of moving, you know, you clearly have had to move quite a long distance, you know, many different times. What did you learn about doing those moves, especially like this latest one coming to Austin, where you know, like you said, you have your children are now in their 20s, and you know, adulting on their own. Talk to me a little bit about how that move to Austin was for you, especially as you're in this transition, you know, becoming an empty nester, and you know, seeing the children going off on their own, because that was a weird experience for me, and I'm curious how it was for you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. This whole move back to the US was actually pretty unplanned. From the time that my husband and I thought about it to the time that it really happened, it was less than 4 to 6 months.
Oh
And
wow.
neither of us had ever been to Austin before. So, and we hardly knew much about Texas. And so we did not want the Michigan cold or the snow. And so that was one of the driving factors. Um, in this whole move, we bought the house online, and we had no idea, where in Austin this house was, how it really looked. And we had done a ton of research, on the communities that we wanted to live, but there's only so much you can do when you're still living in the other end of the world, about a city that you've never been to. So about the move, I think it goes in three different phases. The first phase, I think, Beverly, is purely logistical. It's getting to your new house, getting the digs set up, and
Yep.
making sure that the net works, and you have somebody to mow the lawn or whatever, right? And what day is trash day, and you figure it all out. And then you're figuring out the logistics of your life, where you're going to do your groceries, blah blah blah. So that's the first phase.
Yep.
And that phase is more physical, because you're actually lifting, going, trying to figure things out. um, the second phase, I think, really is the emotional phase. The emotional phase comes after the physical phase, because you're like, and you just exhale at that point, and you're saying, okay, so from where do I start to build my tribe,
Right.
of men and women? Where do I start? I don't run into high school friends here. I don't have my teachers, my college mates, my alumni network. I don't have the organizations that I used to serve with. I don't have my colleagues. I don't have my team. And so that is leaves you in a very vacant space emotionally. So you try to pick yourself up from there as a phase two. And then the third phase, I think, really is the mental and the emotional phase. And the mental and the professional phase. And the mental and the professional phase is, where am I among who am I? What can I do to make this place better? And what must I do? They're two different questions completely. And all of that is driven by curiosity,
Mhm.
based on respect. which is why when I moved here in June of 2021, I think through December and early 2022, I was dealing with the logistical part and the emotional part. And then when I knew that my kids were all settled, my husband started his work, my home was fine, then I'm like, okay, so it's phase three. Let me first find out who I live among. And it was with that respect that I reached out, and it was a lady by the name Rochelle Grossman, who was my first meeting on January 14th last year. And that was my first coffee. And I just asked her to give me a list of organizations, meetings, events that I could go to. And every time I wouldn't miss a single event. And I would always follow up with the coffees. I set myself a target of having 3 coffees a week. There were days that I had 3 coffees a day, and I
Wow.
networked, and I decided to actually do this geographically. I did the Leander area, the Cedar Park and Round Rock area. I did Lakeway and my community. I live in Steiner Ranch. I did SoCo, downtown Austin, Westlake, and I just found and became a member of organizations that catered to these different sub-geographical localities within Austin. And so I started to, learn about how people here think. In Michigan, for example, when you get up and go to a work meeting, obviously, you're going to be wearing gray, blue, and it's automotive, it's manufacturing, it's formal, and you have to go in heels. And here, I quickly learned that my business suits were not going to be used as much. That you could wear a jeans and a belt and just show up to a meeting, and it would still be acceptable. And I got used to that and learned about that weirdness of Austin, right? And the tattoos of Austin, and the food trucks, and the wines in the afternoon, and a beer if you want to grab a beer. Yeah, all of
Yeah.
that was so new.
Hey, moving from Dallas, I mean, I lived in Dallas for 16 years, and I completely agree. The dress code is definitely more relaxed here. Um, Makeup is significantly reduced down here. But the food trucks, I'm still getting used to food trucks.
Right.
When you get, the write-ups in the paper about the best new chefs, and they're working out of a food truck, it still is not quite computing for me.
Right.
Um, but wow, what an amazing systematic way of finding out about the community that you just moved to, and what a great roadmap for anybody listening who is feeling that they have not found their footing yet in wherever they are, even if they've been living in an area for many years. Um, that's incredible. Have you I mean, is this something that you offer to your clients through your work, and how to kind of really insert yourself into the community? Because I wouldn't have thought about going and doing all of those groups all at once, just, and like you said, just focusing on a geographic area. I typically tend to be a little bit more scattershot, which is not always the best way to go about things.
Well, um, just to finish that story that I was
Oh,
telling
sorry, I
you.
interrupted.
Sorry. I'm going to come and talk about this too in a second. But um, after I had all of these coffees and attended all of these events, I started to make a list of organizations that I wanted to lend my time to. Uh, and there were a combination of factors that helped me decide that. One is, where can I add value? Two, uh, what will help my business? And three, are there any things that I am passionate about outside of my work that I can help if it leads to greater good? And the list of organizations that I came up for myself, the Austin Businesswoman, Wilco HR, the Leander Educational Empowerment Fund, which is the fundraising wing of the LISD board. Uh, when I went and became a member of the Texas Diversity Council, when I joined the Executive Council Network, the Network in Action group. All of these groups, all of these events, and I attended provisors meetings. I attended, the Metropolitan Breakfast Club meetings, and it was you can be everywhere, but you can get a feel for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use your own parameters to select organizations that you want to be a part of and you think that you can add value to. And once I drew up my list of organizations and started networking and offering and trying to do my best really in delivering that value. And therefore, by doing that, I garnered more visibility and I started to build more relationships. And those relationships again were based on gratitude, on respect, because I was blown away by how warm people were and how giving people really are if only you're able to demonstrate your good intention and
Mm-hmm.
and you're sincere about your effort and you're willing to work, because it's crazy to manage so many different organizations, events. And I do a ton of public speaking, as you know, and Olga Adler of Austin Businesswoman gave me my first stage in Austin when she had me keynote at her gala. And that kind of added and started this momentum of me and my public speaking opportunities. And people have received me so warmly for my Eastern philosophy, as well as as much as my Western expertise and value systems. So I think being at that intersection of the distinct philosophies of the world and ways of living, and bringing that to Austin and building these relationships, they have now, I think, given me a sense of identity. And identity comes, and is it possible after age 50 to move to a brand new place and in less than 2 years have roots, have relationships, and have identity? Yes, it is.
Yes, and you certainly have built some very deep roots because truthfully, I hadn't realized that it had only been less than 2 years when I met that you'd even been in this town. I thought you were a fixture already because of how you embraced the, um, you know, how you embraced the gardening of it all. I mean, you're talking about roots. So, again, as someone who also is bringing a lot of Western sensibility as well as the Eastern study of feng shui and Chinese astrology, you're bringing in the Indian viewpoints. And I know that Vastu Shastra is a kind of a sister philosophy to feng shui. Um, how did you have someone helping you find the house? Because you said you bought it online. How did you make sure that your house was conforming to Vastu principles when you were buying?
Yes, I think like many people of Indian descent, we do have a very strong and firm belief in how physical spaces affect your reality. And we are very conscious about our own immediate environment, whether it's our workspaces or our personal living spaces. When we bought the house, we had a realtor, and that person was just a genius when it came to Austin real estate, but didn't know much about your field.
Mhm.
So what we did was we took the floor plan to a consultant in India, and we knew we wanted, the house to face a certain direction, the pool to be, the water area to be in a certain direction, greenery in one side, the fireplace in one side. Where in the house is the stove, the kitchen stove, because that's considered the center of, because the lady of the house, we believe, um, represents that fire energy. She's the one who's traditionally responsible for cooking, right? So we assume that that fire god in the house is going to take care of not just hers, but everybody that she loves, right? And it's that immense feminine power that we believe in as well. So when we had to bring all of these aspects and marry them with the traditional aspects of our home buying, property taxes, lot sizes, the neighborhood, da da da, whatever. So that's how we did it. And yes, I do believe in a lot of these things that I don't have proof of. I really don't. And what I do know is that it works. And if you will permit me, I'd like to share one example of why
Sure.
I think it works.
Absolutely. Share
Yeah,
away.
thank you. Thank you. So, in spite of the fact that, my parents had given me so much education, truly liberal with my upbringing. I grew up with guys for friends, whether it was college or whatever. But I did have a traditional Indian arranged marriage, which was a gamble, any which way you looked at it.
Yeah.
But when you get an alliance, from a prospective groom, the first thing that the parents do is they compare the horoscopes of the man and the woman. And they're able to assess compatibility on multiple levels, mental, emotional, whatever, right? So they're able to, and my husband and I, according to our horoscopes, we were really compatible, and which is why my parents decided to go forward and take the next step. And now, nearly 26 years later, here we are. And yes, I can tell that some of the things that that person who compared our horoscopes said 26 years before, earlier, it still holds true today, because what he had said about my personality and how my husband would be supportive of that, and why I needed a person with those traits. So whether it's astrology, whether it is feng shui, vastu, sometimes even numerology, we believe that, for things that you believe in, you don't need the proof. And if you don't believe in it, no proof is enough.
Yep.
So
I
so it's crazy. I don't try to explain it, and I don't expect. It's ridiculous to expect other people to understand it too, because it's does sound outlandish. It does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I know when I first started studying feng shui, it was after I had finished with I had breast cancer when I was young, when I was 36.
Oh,
And so after I finished with all of the chemo and the surgery and the radiation and all of that, one of my neighbors gave me a book on feng shui. And that's how I got started with it. And my first thought was, well, that's a weird thing to give me. But, when you go through an experience like that, suddenly it's like, well, why not? I've done everything else to my body. Why don't we just try something? And it blew my logical Virgo, hyper analytical, super perfect, hyper perfectionist brain completely apart. And when I would follow some of the instructions in this book, based and within days, whatever I had been intending to happen would happen, and then some. And it was just one coincidence after another. And it was enough to kind of propel me. Took that curiosity of, well, wait a minute, if I can do this, if this happens after just reading this, a couple things out of this one little book, what if I actually knew what I was doing? What
wow.
could happen then? And that's when I continued to take courses. And it's actually also what propelled me to move from practicing a westernized version of feng shui into the more classical, because again, I noticed that, oh, look, I have a red, I painted my south facing door blue. Well, that's a water element, but the red, the south is a fire element. I'm dousing our possible promotion opportunities. Okay. So then I did that, and it's like, oh, just it was as if this how you say the dam broke, but it really did. It was like, okay, my husband got more, he got a lot more attention at work, positive attention. Kids started getting along again. People started finding me more with the feng shui work and with the energy work, the coaching piece. just after painting my front door. It's like, oh, dang it, I'm going to have to
Wow.
retrain myself. And so I did. So after we moved here, took about a year, like you said, to kind of get everything settled, get the house in order, make sure you know the lay of the land, where the good grocery stores are. I started taking classes in the classical, even traveling to Malaysia, to Kuala Lumpur to study with the teacher that I align myself with now.
Beautiful.
So yeah, no, it's it's interesting because a lot of what I'm hearing is, even with the work that you're doing to help bridge the gap, bridge that divide, the cultural divide, there are a lot of connections and differences of how we're approaching things that a person can put words to, but it still is a feeling, that openness, that being willing to engage and to explore, that is still very much of an intangible mindset to me. And that's a difficult thing to teach to someone who is not used to that. Do you have any particular techniques that you use to help open the mind of someone who might have been a little more closed minded in the past?
Well, the one thing that I believe about any kind of change is that it has to start with self awareness.
Mm,
And a person sometimes is so busy going about their day to day life that they don't have the time to pause and think about, where am I, how am I, and how could I be. And once I think you call their attention to the possibilities that could be with minimal effort, I think my job is actually half done. And once I think that light bulb goes off inside their head, um, the second thing, though, is Beverly, and that I'd like to talk about too, is that um, oftentimes, there have been too many examples of people having tried to step out and being hurt or being received negatively or have a negative experience, and that kind of embeds itself so deeply in their hearts and minds that they hesitate to engage in anything ever again like that. And that's tremendously unfortunate. And sometimes, what is intended is not the way in which it is received. And that's where I think all of us are as humans today. And that's tragic because that impedes our personal growth so much. And so I wish that I could change, but no, I cannot. I cannot change that. But yes, what I could do and what I try to do is open people to the idea of possibilities. Talk about how things are done in other places, what has worked in other places, just alternate value systems and the results. And perhaps then, they would be open to considering that there is more than one way to do anything. The second thing that happens is uh, I also am very open and honest about my own life, and it's not easy to be in front of a room of strangers and tell them about experiences that you had. How you were as raised as a girl child in a conservative society, and how I transformed into very much this Western woman who's like anybody else here, empowered in more ways than I could even imagine. um, and I become that vulnerable self. And the reason that you have to become that is so that people can see and learn from your own example. And that's the
mhm.
most you can do in terms of being genuine. And I can tell them, look, I mean, I was here, I was screwed over, I didn't find a way out. And but I'm here and I'm okay and I'm more than okay. And and so I think that the second one is, I think, a certain amount of demonstration of open and honest feeling and life experience. I think that is a second tool, because you'd be surprised about how many people can connect with your experiences as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, as a teacher, right? So that's my second thing. And the third thing that really helps, Beverly, is because I was raised with so less, and my parents didn't have materially a whole lot. We weren't terribly poor or anything. I wore nice clothes and stuff, but there weren't no vacations or anything like that. But my life was not materially lacking. In it, maybe like I would get one pair of shoes that would last me a couple of years. That kind of upbringing.
Clearly, your feet didn't grow as fast as mine did.
Yes, that's true, which is why I don't like standing next to you, Bev. You're so tall.
Well, what can I say?
But
I'm a tall girl.
yes, and beautiful. But I think the third part is when I come to a society that is materially so blessed, and yet sometimes emotionally quite vacant in some spaces, it breaks my heart. Everything that my husband and I own, we owe to America. So I am always operating from that plane of gratitude, and for a sense to give back and do what I can. And that is why I think, uh, along with the data that I use in my professional development programs, the academic theories, the case studies, the role models, the exercises that I use, I back that up with wisdom. And I try
Yep.
to get that wisdom from conversations that I have with people who are phenomenally different from me.
See, and it is that spirit of gratitude that is always present around you. And it is, and again, that's one of the things that has always drawn me to you is you work hard, and you receive beautifully. Not very many people know how to receive well. It is sad that receiving has been almost demonized in certain areas of our country. It's great to give, especially your cast-offs, but giving what other people need, and that's that so they can receive it and be able to do something with it. And Vidya, that's one of the things that I would love to help you find more opportunities for you to share your message in speaking engagements. And so what I will do in the show notes is put a link to your contact information so that other organizations might be able to find you, so they too can receive this wisdom that you are so filled with and that you share so generously. Um,
Thank you.
so, Vidya,
Grateful.
is there anything else that you would like to share with us on today's podcast, as far as how all of these experiences, has it changed how you are a mother? Has it changed how you are approaching friendships? How is that? I'm curious about all of the study that you've done about building community, about bridging differences. How does that translate to your world as an individual?
I'm going to go back to what I said before, right? Beverly is essentially the same person wakes up at home and the same person goes back into work.
There
So
you go.
the same person from work is going to come back home. And I also believe that when it comes to your personal relationships, with every stage of your life, your relationships evolve. When I
Yep.
was newly married, my husband and I were, of one type. We were roommates, and then we became parents, and we fussed about the baby's cold, and we raised that together. So now I think, just like that, even motherhood changes with every as your kids go through the different years,
Mhm.
right? And what I can say is that in my entire experience now, over the past almost 2.5 years, moving to Austin, building all of these relationships, regardless of people's opinions on anything that's happening in the political world, in the business world, in the economic world, just being able to connect to so many people, um, I think that our kids do as we do. They don't do as we say. And if I want to leave any kind of legacy, my legacy has to be left in people, not for people. You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
And
I love that, leaving your legacy in people, not for people.
not for people. So I think it's the one thing that has helped me is, I think, my intention and my ability to build these relationships, but what I have received from women like you, the men and women of Austin, the organizations, my clients, and between now and October 20th, I have half a dozen speaking engagements, not just here, but in Dallas and Detroit. I work with community colleges because that is another podcast by itself. I've done so for 20 plus years, and yeah. So I think, if I'd like to leave a message back on this podcast, it's one. Thank you so much for having me on it and for allowing me to voice some of my deeper thoughts in a very naked way. I thank you for that. And for a message for the listeners is, uh, you know sometimes it's the differences that enrich us. It's opening yourself to the possibility that something is actually true. Maybe feng shui is true. Maybe you can entertain that thought. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe intermittent fasting works. Who the hell knows? But what's the harm in trying, right? and
Exactly.
and that's all it is, because we're just floating on this blue ball, and we're all blessed to be here. And nothing's really that serious, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Vidya, you're the best. You are. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much of yourself with us. Um, I am so excited to see you as you continue to grow your empire, grow your sphere of influence, and again, anything I can do to help you share your message so that you can leave your legacy in more people, I'm just thrilled to be able to do that. So thank you again. And well, we may have to go explore that other podcast down the road.
Sure thing. And thank you again, Beverly, for helping me in more ways than you know.
Oh, all right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Bye bye.